Hi, everyone, and welcome to Brunch with Bigfoot, Michigan Rob, and I'm your host, BMR. And as always, I'm joined by the bearded one, Tex. If this is your first time here, please subscribe on YouTube to Tex's Front Porch. Give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, and don't forget to hit the alert bell. You can find us on Odysy Radio, iHeartRadio, and on Facebook at Texas Front Porch. You can also reach us by email at paracryptidencounters@gmail.com or by text at 972-559-0988. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube to Bigfoot Michigan Rob. If you enjoy our content and would like to support us, the Super Chat is always open, or you can Venmo us at @text6717. Thank you and enjoy the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Brunch with Bigfoot, Michigan Rob. How is everybody out in YouTube land? How is everybody listening on Odysy Radio, iHeartRadio? For you folks listening out there, you'll get the first half of the show. Then please subscribe to Texas Front Porch or Bigfoot, Michigan Rob to catch the show in its entirety. And Tex, why don't you bring yourself up here? We've got a great show lined up for everybody.
Man, I am stoked about this one, brother. You know, D.A Roberts, he's not only a great guest, great guy, he's a good friend of ours, you know. And, man, the conversation we were having off air, I was like, oh, stop, because we would have went going. We would have kept going.
Yeah. You know, we were 3 minutes late. Really just listening to DA. Absolutely, Tex, just listening to DA. I know this will be a great show because I love those shows where, you know, as a host, a co-host, yes, 2 or 3 questions. And this guy is knowledgeable. He's a great storyteller, has a lot of great experiences. And with that being said, why don't we bring up DA, Tex?
There he is.
How's it going, guys?
Hey, DA. How's it going, buddy?
Doing good.
You know, again, we were all excited backstage. And I'm not going to start this show with the typical, hey, you know, give us your bio, right? Because most people that have not heard of DA, go to DARoberts.com. He's on YouTube. He's also an author. In fact, he's written a book. It's a series. I don't know all your books, DA, but I know you have a series, The Lakeview Man. You just came out with the in February, I think it was The Beast of Blanc Road. And the first question, just to get the show rolling, is not the typical, again, DA, how'd you get involved with this? But in writing your books, you compile what you've learned in the field to these books, or is it just something that's fictional, but is there yet some of your research involved in these? Because they're quite fascinating.
What I do is I've been researching the subject of cryptids since the late 70s. And over the years, you know, compiling, you talk to people that have had sightings, you read all the accounts you find online, listen to podcasts all the time. I take these behaviors and I look for commonalities. And these are the behaviors I use to create the creatures in my books. So the books are fiction, yet they're based on actual behaviors and in some instances, actual encounters.
Yeah, that's awesome. If I had to buy a book for every guest I'd have on, I wouldn't be able to pay my electric bill. But that's certainly the series. The series I'm certainly going to look forward to getting. And so why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you've been doing of late out in the field?
I've been I did some a video down at Tonka State Park. There's been some Bigfoot sightings in that area. Those date back just decades. That's a very thickly wooded area. It's in Camden County, Missouri, near Camdenton, right on Lake of the Ozarks. Like I said, rich history of sightings in that area. And we are planning a expedition down to a place called War Eagle Park. That's in Arkansas, kind of central Arkansas on Beaver Lake. And there was a sighting just a couple of years ago from a couple people riding horseback on the trails. They said a gray Bigfoot creature with a pronounced snout came charging out of the woods and basically chased them and their horses out of the woods. So that's another place we're planning on hitting. And it's another place that's pretty dense woods. So I'm trying to get hooked up with a buddy of mine that's got a gator so we can get really far back in there and shoot some video. And I'm looking at adding a drone to the collection so we can we can get some aerial footage. But I recently purchased one of those cone boom mics, the directional mics, and I'm really looking forward to sitting around, just set out in the woods some night, just absolutely quiet, and see what kind of audio I can record. So we've got a lot of stuff on the plate for the rest of the summer. But and I'm also at some point this summer, maybe this fall, I'm going to come down there and hopefully go to Brown Springs with Tex.
Hell
That would be
yeah.
awesome. Go ahead, Tex. I know I could hog the show, and I'm going to let Tex talk on that because that's definitely a place you got to visit, DA. Go ahead, Tex.
I am doing my best to say hi to everybody, and I know I'm not going to get everybody, but I think I got most of them. That's why I was typing. In fact, I saw Kyle real quick, Kyle Ray in chat. He sent us an encounter, and it's a very different encounter. But I'm going to talk to him more, and we may or may not be having him on the show and talk about his encounter, but it's very interesting. Now, you were talking, DA, about the elongated pronounced snout.
Mm-hmm.
Or do you think you're dealing with a Bigfoot down there?
I think we're dealing with the type of Bigfoot known as a gugway.
Oh, okay. I got you. Okay.
I from the description, it doesn't sound at all like a Dogman. I'm the Region 2 director of North American Dogman Project, so
Right.
yeah, I know what a Dogman looks like. From the description of this, it sounds like a gugway because it's built massive, it's built broad like a Bigfoot. There was no comment of it looking wolf-like at all. They basically just said it looked like a massive Bigfoot with a snout, which basically describes the gugway, which is more mandrill-like or baboon-like, if you prefer. But I think we may have a gugway type creature down that way, or possibly a clan.
Now, I do want to get your opinion on something, since we're talking about gugways, the snout, and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
The beast of seven shoes.
Yes.
Is that what we're talking about here?
I think that is definitely a gugway. If there's a graphic going around, it's made the round of a lot of websites where they talk about the 7 types of dogmen, and one of them they show like a baboon type creature, and I think that is a misidentified gugway. I don't think it's a dogman in any way, shape, or form, because that's the one type they always describe as having feet like ours. There's plantigrade and digitigrade feet. We have plantigrade. Bigfoot has plantigrade. Dogman has digitigrade feet, much like the hawk of a dog.
Well, let me pull back the reins real quick on this, because a lot of the wildlife experts that I talk to and stuff say it's impossible for something to walk upright for a long period of time, at a normal rate of speed. You've seen dancing dogs and everything with the digigrade feet and everything. They can do it, but it's very, very awkward.
Right.
Now, I saw a dog man when I was 16, very up close. And to me, I don't think most of what people talk about the backwards facing legs. And I kind of think that may be something that, because you got to admit, most encounters are like that.
Yeah, they're quick. Yeah, my fingers are too fat to snap too.
It happens real damn quick.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think, because when I described mine, to me, it didn't have the backwards facing legs. It wasn't a true hawk.
Yeah.
And to me, it looked like just a long foot, but he was up on the balls of his feet. And I think that's what a lot of people are seeing, but they see that heel going up, and it's a long, kind of narrow foot. Mine was anyway. Yeah. And I think that may be what we're seeing. And I think that takes out the argument of the digigrade footed critter not being able to walk. And then I made that comment, and actually it was Shelly Covington, Montana, a great friend of mine. And she goes, well, normally that's, they're doing that at a high rate of speed. Well, in my defense, the thing was running across the road, and it did dive across the fence. So that's the only time that I saw it was moving at a high rate of speed.
Yeah.
So, and I think But I got to thinking about it. And what do we do when we're trying to be quiet? You move toe to heel.
Right. Move on the
You
balls
know,
of your feet.
right. So because you can feel what's under your feet better. And I think that's maybe what's happening here. And I think that's why we only get that front part of even on tracks, you only get that front part. You don't get the true length of the track on a Dogman.
Right.
But I mean, you've been researching them longer than me. I mean, I don't go out looking for these critters. If I run into one, hey, okay, cool. But I've never specifically went out looking for Dogman.
Right.
Y'all have.
Many times.
Yeah. So is that something possible that could be going on here, or what do you think? I mean, you've dealt with more Dogman tracks than I have.
There have been Dogman stories, eyewitness accounts where they talked about it walking more plantigrid like us, but it had the head of a wolf. So it's entirely possible that it's like squatting down on the hawk. But there are also a large number of Dogman sighting reports where they talk about it approaching on all fours like a large wolf. And just before it went up on its hind legs, they heard what sounded like a popping sound, like cracking your knuckles. Yeah. And then it stood up and had hands. I think there's something about the morphology of the hands that they can pop them back into place and run on them like a gorilla does with its knuckles. How gorilla's knuckles will broaden out, and when it travels on all fours, I think Dogman does something similar. I think they pop that back into place, and if one of them's killed in that like that, it just looks like an overly large wolf.
Well, now I know when I saw mine, it dove over a 5-strand barbed wire fence, which for those of you who don't know, is approximately 5 to 5.5 feet tall. Okay, the fence. He dove over the fence. He was on 2 legs when I saw him, and then he dove over the fence. And when he hit the other side, he melted down to all fours. There wasn't no, and I've heard the stories about the sinew and the bones popping and everything. And I got to tell you, I get up out of a chair and my sinew and bones pop. So, it's, I'm not really convinced that they morph parts of their body.
I think they do it very quickly.
Yeah, right. But mine did appear to have human-like hands. Now human-like, that's a broad spectrum.
Most of the descriptions I've heard of people that actually got a good look, including Tim Kumbo Baker, actually mentioned they had hands very much like a raccoon. And if you look at a raccoon's hands, the fingers are very spindly, but at the same time, they will knuckle those right back down and haul ass on the ground. They're very good at it.
Well, in fact, I mean, raccoons are so, their front paws are so human-like that there's been cases that there've been a paw found in the woods, or actually in a crime scene, and there for a while they thought it was a fetus, a human fetus.
Well, raccoons are surprisingly dexterous. I had one unzip my tent and come in one night.
I believe that. I mean, I've had them.
They're little turds, man. They are the thieves of the forest.
Yeah, yeah. And they're smart, man. When it comes, because, and that's another thing. When we talk about how intelligent these critters are. Well, if you look at, just take the raccoon for example, and when they're trying to get away from something and throw something off its trail, man, these things are clever. They'll backtrack, they'll jump off of things, and they'll cross water, the whole 9 yards. And in fact, they'll cross water and then cross it back again.
Yeah, they're very good at throwing you off their track.
Yeah, it leads to a dead end. Even dogs, it throws dogs off the trail. So, and a lot of people don't know. I mean, this is just a little tidbit of trivia for you. A raccoon, if he gets a dog out in the middle of a river or a pond or whatever, he'll drown the dog. Mm-hmm. They'll climb up on top of a dog's head and drown the dog. These things are smart. Now, if we do what, Rob?
Go ahead. Continue on. Go ahead.
But
I'll
if
go ahead and finish that up.
but if these critters, these dogmen and these Bigfoot are half as intelligent as we give them credit for, you know. But
Yeah.
anyway, I'm sorry, DA. I apologize for being a mic hog today.
Oh, no, dude.
Because when me and you talk, you know, the Katie barred the door because you know.
Dude, I always
I'm
love
just
it
glad
when you talk about stuff because we've talked 3 or 4 times now. Every
Yeah.
time I walk away going, man, I didn't think of that, or I learned something new. So I love hanging out and listening to you talk because
Well,
you've
thank
got
you.
such a wealth of knowledge, man.
Yes, Tex is a wealth of knowledge. DA is a wealth of knowledge. I kick back and I listen. Just kidding. But yeah, it should be, we made me the host of the show, but Tex always is the one talking. But you know what? That's why I love our show. We're a different type of show out there, right? And to Tex's point, I had a friend that cornered a raccoon. You never want to make that mistake because it was not very eventful for him. We're talking about Gugway. I don't want to get into that story. Maybe off air. We're talking about Gugway. Now, I've talked to several different folks who say that it's primarily in northern climates or in Canada or northern Minnesota, maybe in the upper peninsula of Michigan. Do you have any relevance to that statement, or do you think there's kind of like the Bigfoot where they're pretty much anywhere, or do you think they're isolated in a bigger setting or more rural area?
I think they're expanding their territory. Initially, Gugway and the other type they refer to as the Genosqua were only heard about in Canada, maybe up near the Great Lakes. But there have been recent Gugway sightings as far as south as the Texas Big Thicket, southeastern Oklahoma, and in parts of Georgia. So I think the Gugway is expanding its territory.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with that too. And they've been given the nickname by some people. I think maybe First Nations people call them the face eater and things like that.
Mhm.
I don't know. Certainly, though, they're more aggressive than a typical Bigfoot, right? If you hear a Gugway encounter, it's typically a scary one. Where a big, but you can flip a coin. Half of them are the Bigfoot crossing the road. And do you think that maybe and we all talk about a lot of people want to put blame on Bigfoot for the 411, and there's so many things we can go but perhaps I think a Gugway, from what I've read and heard you speak about in text, they could be, I think, more dangerous than actual Bigfoot out in
Yeah,
the forest.
I think the reason being is let's use bears for example. We've all dealt with black bears. I mean, we're all basically Midwestern and southern people. We've all dealt with black bears. Black bears eat berries. They'll eat roots. The occasional squirrel. If they come across something dead, they'll eat part of it. But they're not normally aggressive hunters. They're more foragers. They're omnivores. They'll eat just about anything. Get a little farther north, up in grizzly bear territory, they primarily eat meat, but they will eat roots and berries and whatever else they find. So their diet is still omnivorous, but they tend to eat more meat because they're in a colder climate. Farther north, we hit the polar bear, and all they eat is meat. They don't pick berries. They don't go through people's knapsacks for granola bars. They're confirmed man eaters.
They will hunt you.
They will actively hunt people down. It's happened many, many times. There are villages in Alaska where it's not uncommon for a polar bear to come in and drag somebody out. So these are confirmed man eaters, and I think we see the similar things happen with Bigfoot. I think that the ones that like the Patterson Gimlin are probably primarily omnivorous, that probably eat a lot of berries. And there's a lot of stories about people seeing Bigfoot in and around berry patches. And I don't think they're above grabbing the occasional meaty snack, deer, slow hiker, I don't think they're above it. And I think it would be more opportunistic. But we get a little farther north, we start hitting these Gugway, and the Gugway are far more aggressive, and they're a lot more dependent on meat, because anything in a colder climate, it requires a lot more protein than it requires sugars or things like that. Protein is life. They've got to eat a lot of protein to maintain body mass and to keep warm in these colder climates. But the thing is we start dealing with these Gugway, and the Gugwe are aggressive and smart, but I think they've learned over the years where they can and can't hunt. And in a lot of cases, like you see here, well, for example, here in town, I live in Springfield, Missouri. Uh, Years ago, you would never hear a report of a black bear or a mountain lion inside of town. You might, hear about them in the woods near town, but you wouldn't hear them in town. But we're now getting people with their Ring doorbell cameras catching black bears and mountain lions in town. I think they're expanding their range, looking for food, and I think they're also at some point beginning to lose their fear of us. There's a lot less people out in the woods hunting. People, there's a lot of people that are want to get hunting banned, and I think because of things like that, I think we're going to start seeing a lot more cryptid encounters because there's a lot less penalty for messing with humans. And I think we're going to see more of it. I think we're going to see some of these creatures expanding their range. In fact, there's even stories coming out of Oklahoma that I'm sure Tex can confirm of people seeing Bigfoot come into town and raid trash cans. There's one town in southeastern Oklahoma. I think it's Hokatown. I think that's what it is. They had a problem with them. People seeing them all the time raiding trash cans in town, and that's right near the Ouachita Mountains down by Broken Bow Lake. There are reports of people seeing them just routinely going up to trash cans, not being afraid, raiding trash cans in town. So I think there's a considerable amount of territory expansion going on. Also, a lot of people are less afraid to come forward with their stories because of shows like Finding Bigfoot and Expedition Bigfoot and Expedition X, that they brought the subject of cryptids more into the mainstream, and people are less stigmatized for bringing them forward. Plus, in the last decade, we've got a lot more channels like yours and like mine and Dixie Cryptid and other channels that are now bringing cryptids to the podcast world, and people have a venue where they can bring their accounting stories. So I think a certain amount of it excuse me, I think a certain amount of the uptick is people are less afraid, and I do think they're expanding their territory and less afraid of us.
With saying that, do you think that makes them more dangerous for us? I mean, if there's more and more people out in the woods, and let's say that a Bigfoot or a Gugwe are more conditioned to seeing us, don't you think that eventually, though, that tide is going to come to a collision where we might have
absolutely.
more?
I definitely think so. I mean, there was a comedy skit that Ron White did where he was talking about this grizzly bear up in Alaska, and I think it's pretty much like that. Especially if you're getting an older one that can't hunt as well. Someone like me that's a little more stoved up that isn't going to be chasing things through the woods. It's going to look one direction and see a deer hauling butt through the woods at 35, 40 miles an hour. And then you got another guy listening to an iPod wearing Birkenstock sandals, not paying attention. It's going to go, I think I can catch that one.
Yeah, that's why I always say I ain't running from nothing, not because I'm brave, because I can't.
I got to stand my ground.
Yeah. But, it's always, and I think and I've said this 1,000 times, I think that the attitude towards humans changes from tribe to tribe to tribe. I mean, if you look at the tribes of humans, that but in New Guinea and stuff like that they really haven't had any exposure to humans humans, white folks, or anybody outside their tribe, they are they react differently. I mean, there's a reason one of these planes come back with arrows and spears in the belly of them.
Yeah, I've seen photos.
And it's like you may walk into one village and be greeted like, almost a god. And then the next village, you may end up, being spun over a spit on a fire, So I think we have the same thing. We run into the same thing with these critters. That I think it's honestly, it may be the run-ins that they've had with humans that dictate that too.
Well, I think a lot of it is regional, and I think a lot of it is individual temperament. I mean, like you take 5 guys and send them out to go to a bar and have a few beers. There's always going to be one guy in the crowd that runs his mouth and gets you into trouble.
Right.
In every crowd of people, there's going to be one jerk in the crowd. So I'd say individual temperament plays a role in it as well. You might have an otherwise peaceful clan of Bigfoot, and you might have a young rogue male that's an up-and-comer that's wanting to challenge the alpha, wants to show how tough he is. He's like, oh yeah, you think that's bad? Watch me rip the arms off this hiker.
Right. You know, and I also think just every once in a while you're going to run across one's having a bad hair day, you know, or I'll tell you what happened to us one time. We were out in the field. We were walking, we pulled up to this one site, and we were about to walk down the floodplain, and there was 3 of us. And here comes this fawn running at a dead run out of the trees. Almost came within about 1.5 feet of running flat out into us before she stopped. And she looking behind her. Well, she froze when she saw us, almost ran into us. Turned around, did a U-turn, and went right back where she was. She ran for maybe 20 yards into the brush. We heard a tussle, and then nothing. So I think if you interrupt something that these critters are doing, whether you know they're maybe doing a horizontal mambo or they're stalking something and you run it off or anything like that, or you wake it up from a nap or, something like that. It's like I said, there's a plethora of things that could cause, an attack. I don't think that's why they're rare though.
Exactly. I think it also affects time of year. Some certain times of the year, from hunting and being out in the woods, certain times of the year, game's scarce. I've told this story a few times. I don't know if I've told you guys, but there was a time I was hiking up in Rocky Mountain National with some buddies of mine, and we rounded a corner and there was a grizzly. And I told them, I said, don't run. And all I heard was because people took off behind me, and I'm standing there looking at this bear, and it kind of looked at me, and I looked at it, and it went its way, and I went mine. But had that been right before hibernation time, or if it had cubs with it, that would have been a different story. So environmental factors definitely play a role in encounters and the tone of the encounter. If deer are plentiful and there's plenty of food, it might look at us and go, yeah, it's not worth the trouble. But if it's been hunting for days and hasn't seen a deer or anything larger than a squirrel, it's kind of like, I don't know, that guy might be kind of tasty.
Right.
Too, I was thinking too, DA, like, I think we all would agree that Bigfoot is like a socialized creature right there they have a family unit, a troop, or maybe a troop, I would say. And do you think too that a lot of the encounters, the scarier ones or the more dangerous ones, would be from a Bigfoot that perhaps was alienated from the family or the troop, or maybe just a rogue? He's disgruntled. Do you think that perhaps these are the ones that we're more wary of versus just a settled family where everything's going well for them?
I love the disgruntled comment.
Yeah, disgruntled, because I've never been gruntled. I don't know about if I've ever been gruntled, but I've been disgruntled a time or two. Yeah. I think individual temperaments do definitely play a factor. I think these rogue, it could have been an ousted alpha. It could have been a young up and comer who got kicked out of the troop because he tried to challenge the alpha. I think that certainly plays a factor, but we can't dismiss the possibility of clans that have learned that, hey, these other 2-legged pink guys over here are slow and good with ketchup.
Yeah.
Well, down here in the South, we use mustard.
Yeah, mustard and biscuits. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And nobody puts ketchup on a hot dog. I have to say that. That just popped in my head. Nobody. Come on.
I want to kind of shift gears real quick, because I want to get into the. I got to get into the Dogman thing.
Okay.
Because I mean, you touched on, we're getting more reports of Bigfoot in the burbs.
Yeah.
But we're seeing the same thing with Dogman. And not to mention, we're seeing more Dogman sightings nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's been a huge uptick in the state of Maine. They've seen a lot, and I've been getting some reports. In fact, I watched a news report from a local news station out of Taylor, Mississippi, where the siege at Lockett Ranch happened. Those are still ongoing, and they're getting large animals like cows and horses that are being found mutilated and twisted. So there's something definitely going on in the area around Taylor, Mississippi, and that's another place I really want to get to.
So now that's something I've got to have an answer on, because I thought for the longest time that Lockett Ranch thing was fiction.
I did too, but I get conflicting stories on that. There are some people that say it was made up for a YouTube channel, and then I got a guy that came on my show and wanted to. He didn't come on the show. He was in the chat and he messaged me, and he lives in Taylor, and he goes, "No, that happened." He says it's not exactly how it's portrayed in some of the YouTube stories. He says, but that happened, and we're constantly having problems with these creatures around Taylor.
And also, and I think that's a problem, because we get these stories and these YouTubers want to embellish them.
Yeah, they want to sensationalize these stories, right, because it gets hits.
And that's fine. I get that, because I mean, I wrote a short story called it, He Left Me for Dead, and I based it on my encounters with Dogman, and also off of a song that I absolutely love from a band called Small Town Titans. And so I combined it, and the story is an inspiration from them. But I say that up front. Yeah. And I just wish that if people's going to embellish a story or whatever, if they would just say that this is based on this encounter.
It's kind of what I did with my books.
There's nothing wrong with that.
But I'm upfront. My books are fiction.
Right. But there's nothing wrong with taking inspiration from something that actually happened, and putting your own twist on it. But it confuses and muddies the water for the community, when we don't say that up front. If we say that up front, it's not a big deal. But because I have no idea what the actual encounter of the Lockett Ranch thing was. I wish I did. Either way, it's fascinating. But that's just me. And I'm not dissing any of the YouTube channels that did this. It's like I said, just be upfront with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Lockett Ranch, right? That was a takeover of property or something.
Basically, the Lockett family ended up abandoning their farm over attacks on the house.
Right.
And that's not uncommon. I've heard stories of people up in Montana that just up and moved because they had Bigfoot slapping the side of their cabin. So I think the Lockett story has truth to it, but the versions we're hearing are basically grandiose versions of the story.
Right.
Like you were saying, embellishments. They're storytelling does that. I mean, anybody that's told a story around a campfire, you might have heard a story about a Bigfoot that scared a group of Boy Scouts, but the story, it slaughtered 25 of them and there were body parts everywhere. And you love hearing spooky stories around a campfire. So it may be just a modern take on the campfire stories, but even in those old campfire stories, there's always some grain of truth to it. And I think if we can get to the bottom of the Lockett story, I think it's more similar to the people that are getting slaps on the side of the house. Right. Things like that. I think it probably killed livestock. I think the Dogmen probably killed livestock, may have hurt people or tried to get in the house. And at some point they're like, you know what, screw this. And they just packed up and left, sold the land. So I think it's probably somewhere more along those lines, but I do think the event actually happened.
Well, and we've got our producer, Shell Squatch, she's got a property in Rio Doce, New Mexico, and she only gets activity when she's there alone. If her husband or her son's up there, nothing happens. But, you know, she's had things scratch on the house. She's had things slap the side of a house about 10 feet up. Things, you know, critters, you know, creep up on her towards her deck and stuff like that. So, and I went up there and investigated, and I found claw marks about 10 feet up on the trailer that they had never seen.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm like, how long's that been there?
Naomi Finn, who has the Naomi Finn Storyteller channel, she's a good friend of mine, and she's had similar things happen, but only when her husband's gone. She's had slaps on the house. She's had something walking around the house, set off the motion sensor light, but not really come into it. But it only happens when her husband's not at home. So I think that's very common, and we hear that story from women, you know, lots of times, that the encounters or the activity only happens when they're alone at the house.
Yeah, do you think that's because perhaps these cryptids, they think they're more at ease with a female versus a male? Because typically, and not that women don't hunt, a lot of times it's the majority of the people in the forest are men with rifles. And is it something about women, maybe perhaps because they can reproduce, or because they're less, how should I say, they're not as intimidating as a man with a weapon?
I think it may be something along those lines, or you know, if you notice a lot of the Native American stories, most of the abduction stories are about women or children. So I think they're far more curious, and I think there's a good possibility that if a woman's home alone and something's slapping the side of her house, I think if she goes outside, she might be one of the missing 411 cases.
Right.
I think it's a very possibility, you know, and it's, I mean, I'm not dissing any women. I know some badass women. I do.
My wife, she's a better shot than I am. I wouldn't mess with her.
Yeah. And I mean, you look at what Shelley Covington Montana does. You look at what Jessica Jones does.
With the she squatchers.
The she squatchers, you know, all that.
Those girls are fearless.
You know, Shelley, she goes out weeks at a time by herself, you know, researching. And I don't know many guys that'll do that, much less women, you know. Now, I ain't sneaking up on Shelley because I have no inkling to get shot. But and you can't run away from her. She'll just track you down. But anyway, I think these critters, they're very primal. Women aren't as intimidating, and there may be other, you know, they may have other ideas. I don't know. I've always told Shell that, well, I think you got one flirting with you. You know, I think it's probably a younger, that's just conjecture, my opinion. And you know what opinions are like. Everybody's got one, and they all stink. But I think it's a young male, and I think he's flirting with her.
My wife and I, we went out to a place here in Missouri called Moon Valley, and it's pretty far off the beaten track. And she stayed in the car, and I went down the river a little bit to shoot some video. And she goes, "What do I do if one approaches the car?" I'm like, "Just tell it you have a headache." She just gave me a dirty look.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, you talk about something approaching the car. There was a young woman that used to have a Dogman channel, and I was a part of her channel for a while. And her encounter was her and one of her girlfriends or cousin, I can't remember, but they were on a double date. And they pulled up to this house, and the guys ran into the house to do something. I don't know what it was. The girls were out in the car. This dog man walks up to the car. And
they profiled that story on what These Woods Are Haunted. On that,
did they?
I saw that episode. That's a really good story.
Yeah, tapping on the window and trying the door handle, and Yeah, they screwed up and they honked the horn. That just pissed it off. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's I don't know. On one hand, I think women have a leg up over male field researchers because I think they have that less aggressive vibe and I just don't think they look like and it is I think they look at them as less dangerous.
Yeah.
And you know, we talk about the intelligence of these critters. And when I say critters, I mean Bigfoot and Dogman, because they're both intelligent creatures. Somebody sent me a meme one time, and it was a picture of a Bigfoot, and it was it pointed out conical head, broad shoulders, this, that, and the other thing, and it had a picture of a Dogman next to it, and it said just pretty much an asshole. And
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean that is pretty much spot on, because I don't know why, but the Dogman critters for some reason seem to get their jollies off of just scaring the crap out of people and intimidating and messing with them. And I don't understand that. I mean, Bigfoot does it, from what we've heard, to a certain extent, chunking rocks at you, hooting and hollering at you, doing all kinds of stuff. But they don't seem to take it to the level that the Dogmen do. Mm-hmm. And I don't understand why, but I don't think Dogmen are evil. A lot of people beat me up over that, but I don't think they're just flat out evil waiting to kill you, because if they were, I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation.
Right. Too, and I hear, and like I always say this too, because my encounter was kind of creepy, and I think there's good and bad in cryptids. There's good, just like there's good and bad in humans, right? I don't think there's one cryptid that's meaner or more evil than another. I think you have the good and bad in everything. And real quick, DA, too, we're talking about women, how they're Bigfoot or these cryptids are more attracted to women. There's researchers that have been maybe out in the field 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, never had an encounter. And but they're doing their thing. They're religious about it. Or a person just happens to walk in the woods, not a researcher. They're on a hike. They run into a Bigfoot. They see it. Perhaps it's traumatic. It doesn't matter. But now they seem to see Bigfoot every time they go out in the woods, and they're not even interested. What do you think? What do you think about that theory? Because I know it's out there. People see these things more apt than other people. In fact, a researcher friend of mine in Texas had mentioned to me that maybe I was marked, right? Because I seen one, and I wasn't even looking for it at the time. Hell, 4 years ago, Bigfoot was the last thing on my mind. I wouldn't be doing this show today if I had my encounter.
I've heard people use that phrase before. You're marked. My first actual wasn't a sighting encounter. It was a physical encounter, but I didn't get direct sight. What I heard approached the back of my deer stand, and I was about 15. And it was clearly on two legs. And when I called out to see who the hell was behind my deer stand, I heard this big intake of breath and then a like that. And that's no animal. There's no deer, no elk, nothing that does that in Missouri. And then it turned and walked off. And I was in a big old walnut tree. And by the time I got out of that deer stand, there was nothing back there. So I went back to my uncle, who he's Native American. He was Cherokee. He passed away a couple of years ago. But I told him what I heard, and he goes, "You heard it?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Take me back to where your stand's at." So we go back out there, and he examined the ground, and he walked around a little bit, and he goes, "It approached you." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, then you can consider yourself marked, because they know who you are. They have your scent, and it's something that they will never forget." And I have not forgot that moment. But I do think some people approach the subject with more open-mindedness, that may not exactly be the right phrase, more open to the experience, we'll call it. And I think they sense that. If you've got a guy that's going out in the woods, it's like, you know what? I get an opportunity, I'm going to put a bullet in that sucker, and I'm going to prove this once and for all. He's never going to see one. But if you go out there with like, hey, you know, I may have a firearm, but it's only here in case I have to use it. I think it's all about your intent. I think much like most animals, I mean, like you can walk up to a dog, and if your intent is to slap that dog in the face, you ain't going to get near it. But if you walk up like, hey puppy, you're going to pet the dog. I think the animals are very good at sensing our intent, and I think if you go out there with the intent of harming one, you're not going to see one.
Well, and you know, and I've talked about that a lot, you know, because just like you mentioned, dogs, you know, horses. Oh my gosh, you talk about sensing something. You know, if you're scared of a horse, or you don't feel confident on a horse, they know it right off the bat, and they'll treat you as such too. They'll knock
absolutely.
you off. You know, they'll
very
pinch, whatever, be ornery. But and they'll test you too. They'll test you. You know, they'll try to get away with something if you know, dirt a knot in their ass and show them who's boss. You know, I mean, and I don't mean being mean to a horse. I will never be mean to a horse. But you've got to let them know who is in the saddle and who's in control.
Yeah, but I've had horses where, you know, I had a quarter horse named Jack, and you could tie the reins around the saddle horn and lean back and say, "Take us home, Jack," and off he'd go. You never had to touch the reins. He knew the way. You know, you could just lean back in the saddle and look around. He didn't care, and he knew exactly where he was going, and he was confident with the rider. But you put a rider on a horse that doesn't know what they're doing, and they'll either throw them or they'll mess with them. And I've seen horses reach back and bite people on the foot. I've seen them walk under tree branches to knock people off. You put an experienced rider on that, and they don't do it. Same horse.
I'll tell you what, one of the this is kind of a funny story, but when I was little, and when I say little, probably 7, 8 years old, I had a Shetland pony. And in fact, I had 2 Shetland ponies. One was called Silver and one was called Scout. And if y'all don't know, go watch Lone Ranger, and that was their names of their horses. And one of them was white and one of them was a paint. And I had Silver out, and he was just ornery. But and Shetland ponies tend to be ornery anyway.
Yeah, they do.
And I was leading him up from the barn. I had the lead rope, here's a mistake. I had the lead rope over my shoulder, and I'm just walking. And he reached up and bit me on the shoulder blade. And of course, I dropped the rein. I couldn't get rid of that lead rope quick enough and ran into the house, screaming, yelling, crying. And my daddy was about half drunk at the time, and woke him up. And what's going on? Blah blah blah. And he got up, walked outside. Now it wasn't bad enough that this ignorant horse had bit me, but he walked outside and the damn thing's eating peaches out of his prize peach trees. My daddy walked up, and the only man I've ever been intimidated by was my daddy. And this is why, because I was right behind him, begging him not to kill my horse. And he walked over that Shetland pony, reached up, grabbed him up underneath the chin by that lead rope, reared back with the right hand, hit that pony right between the eyes, and dropped him to his knees. Dang. I decided right then and there, I never want my daddy to hit me. Now, my dad broke 3 knuckles on his hand when he hit him, but he dropped. Given this is a pony, but you show me anybody else that's going to drop a pony, you know, to his knees when he hits him between the eyes.
That's some force.
But anyway, I'm sorry, I got off on a tangent.
Yeah,
I do it all the time.
Yes, it does happen. Hey, go ahead, Tex, you got it.
Real quick, because I know we're getting close to the end of the hour for our iHeart listeners and our
Odysy
Radio listeners. I just want to throw this out there real quick, and then I'll let y'all take over. Don't forget, guys, June 10th and 11th, Bama Bigfoot Conference. Get your tickets at BamaBigfootConference.com. DA, take it away, brother.
Yes. And also text Jason.
I'll shut up.
Text. That's all right. Text Jason and myself will be speaking there. And also the lovely Jessica Jones will be paying a visit. She and I will be giving out free selfies and autographs. So and we will have our Sharpies. It'll be at the southwest corner of the stage. With that being said, I'm going to revert back to Jessica for a moment, DA, because we were talking about, the being marked in that. And,
Mhm.
as you probably know, DA, because Jessica's now part of our team, she's wonderful. She's got a lot going on. And she's opened my mind to now, not only about being marked, but these frequencies that she's talking about, and energies, and maybe that third eye, right? I'm not
Mhm.
going to say what it is because I got in trouble last time. But you see the show, it was hilarious. But now that's something. Now I never gave too much thought to that. You spoke with her last night on your show. Go check that out.
Mhm.
Everyone, it was a great show. What's your thoughts now? Have
She's
you changed?
certainly given me a lot to think about on stuff like that, and some of the things she was talking about LBL were spot on. I spent almost a week in LBL last year. A lot of time I was out there by myself. My wife told me I was an idiot for it, but it's what it is. My
Hey, I'm
mother
gonna
always.
do it.
When I was a child, my mother told me I would blunder in where angels feared to tread, and that's kind of been how my life has been led. But yeah, I spent quite a bit of time in LBL last year, and Nick Valente from the North American Dogman Project and I met up there, and we actually had a sighting. We saw something at the side of the road. It was about 7 feet tall, between 6.5 and 7 feet tall, and it had a wolf-like head. We only saw it for a few seconds, and then it darted down into a ravine that we couldn't follow it through. But we had a clear sighting, broad daylight, 30 feet off the road. Saw it for about 3 seconds. No time to get my camera up, and I had it in my hand. I mean, I froze when I saw it. But yeah, I very much believe there's a lot of activity in LBL, and LBL is the only place I've ever been in the woods where I never saw animals. I grew up deer hunting in Missouri. You go out in the woods, you're going to hear squirrels, you're going to see turkey, you'll see deer. Yeah, you go out in the woods anywhere, and you're going to see signs of life. And across the canal from LBL over in Grand Rivers, there was a campground we drove through. There were deer in the campground. I saw raccoons and squirrels and everything. You get into the north end of LBL, I didn't see a thing, not even roadkill.
And
It was
real
really
quick,
weird.
and 2D, I'd like to continue this because this is fascinating, maybe for the second half, because what I'd like you to do is coming up on that time for iHeartRadio and Odyssey Radio listeners, where I want you to come over to Texas Front Porch on YouTube live to continue on and listen to DA, because this is a fascinating story. And so you also subscribe to Texas Front Porch for the second half of the show. And DA, I'll give you the opportunity right now to let our iHeart people, where can they find you if they want to look you up?
Okay. Yeah, you can check out all of my books at daroberts.net. You can email me at daroberts@daroberts.net. Check out our YouTube channel, which we have a show called DAX Machina, youtube.com/DA Roberts Author. And you can find me all over Amazon with all of my books. I have 25 currently in print. Probably 12 to 15 of those are cryptid based. Some are other horror in the horror genre, a couple of sci-fi. But yeah, you can find me, all of my media. You can link to everything through my website, which is again daroberts.net.
Awesome. Thanks, DA. And Tex and DA, did you guys want to just roll on and
Sure.
skip the 5-minute break, or keep it going? Because I'm out in a half hour, as you know, Tex. And
Yeah, let's
so it's
just
up to
keep
you.
it going.
Keep it rolling. Okay, DA, again, thank you for that. If you want to continue on with this great story.
Sure. Absolutely.
So one thing I do want to talk to you about, DA, is LBL,
Okay.
because we got some pushback in chat when we started talking about LBL and that massacre incident, however you want to look at it, that it was all a made up story. That this person said that they had done extensive research into that and had an inside track on it. They had family up there in that area, and even they said it was complete hogwash. It never happened. But that's the only time and the only person that I've ever seen or heard go, well, this was made up.
Jody Cook, the founder of the North American Dogman Project, personally interviewed and knew two of the officers that were at the incident. So I believe the incident happened. Also, the campground where it happened, they bulldozed it off.
Right.
If there hadn't been a critical incident at this campground, why would they seal it off?
Yeah, and it's like I was trying to explain, I don't think, well, I replied to him in the comments and I said, something happened. I don't know what it was. It may not be exactly what we've heard, but I do think something happened. And what I keep hearing, and I haven't been up there, so y'all take that with a grain of salt, but when I do get up in that area, I am going to try this. I'm going to try to talk to some locals about it because I've heard the locals do not want to discuss it at all.
That's been my experience. I went into we stayed in Grand Rivers, and I talked to a number of people, and I'm a retired cop, and I even approached a local deputy, and when I identified myself, he basically told me, he says, cop to cop, I'm going to tell you, your best interest is to just drop this and walk away. I'm like, well, I'm researching for a book. He says, I'm telling you again, drop it and walk away. And that's all he would say. He left. However, I actually went into a bait shop in Grand Rivers and brought it up, and the guy threw me out of his store, told me not to come back. You get over to Paducah, Kentucky, which is about 10, 15 miles away. Oh, they were perfectly willing to talk about it. Everybody was familiar with the story. I talked to 3 guys at a barbecue place that all had experiences in LBL. One of them was fishing, and he was going back into a little slough with his trolling motor, and it was right at dusk. And he looked over, and one was standing on the shore with a fish. And when it saw him, it came out at him in the water. I said, what'd you do? He goes, well, I fired up the big motor and got the hell out of there. That's what I did. He said, but it was coming at me. And so in Paducah, they're perfectly willing to talk about it, but in Grand Rivers, they will not talk about it.
And that strikes me as odd because to me, it's like the officer that you approached.
Mm-hmm.
To me, if you really wanted to make somebody less interested in it, you're not going to take that approach.
Right.
You're going to say that's hogwash.
Right.
You're wasting your time.
Yeah, he didn't deny it. He just told me to drop it.
Yeah, and to me that is strange. It's like when we were in Brown Springs and Gary Jr. and Sr. approached the biologist out there, and they finally came clean about what we were doing out there. And what he said was, it wasn't that he said they don't exist. He said, oh, they're not out here right now. So, or they're not around here now.
Best bit of advice I can give you, Tex, when you go there, stop by the visitor center and pick one of these up.
Okay.
It is a huge paper map. You fold it out. It's going to show you places in LBL that you're not going to find just driving around. And one place I would look near is if you can, and it's right on the road they call the Trace. If you can locate the Nickel Cemetery, you are right in the heart of the area where the activity happens.
Oh, okay.
Most of the Dogman sightings and incidents have occurred in the northern end of LBL. There are occasional Bigfoot sightings in LBL, but it's usually at the southern end. And near the center of LBL, they have elk and buffalo herds. They're trying to reintroduce buffalo in the area. And they still report, and you can verify this by asking them, they still report the occasional calf or large animal being attacked and killed.
Yeah, it's like I said, I think something happened. We may not have the whole truth of the incident, which we probably don't. But, it may have been embellished. I don't know. But now I
think it was certainly covered up.
The first time that I heard anything was Coonbo Baker, because he knew or talked to one of the people, the first responders.
Mm-hmm.
What I haven't heard is what you were told. So I would love to hear that.
Well, the version of the story I heard was a family came in a motorhome, and they were early in the camping season. They got there early to get a good sight, And while they were setting up the motorhome, and back in 82, you didn't have that push button on a motorhome that levels itself. You had to get out and hand crank the individual levels and look at the level on the button, on the leveler. You had to look at the indicator to see where the bubble was, and the guy was manually setting it up and trying to level the RV. And it was during this time that something attacked him. And of course, there were no eyewitnesses of the actual attack, only the aftermath. But allegedly, this dogman type creature attacked the husband. He was dismembered. Supposedly, an arm was torn off and his head was nearly severed. And the young boy, who was accounts vary from 9 to 12 years old, made a run for the door of the motorhome. The creature caught the kid and killed the kid there. The mother and young daughter, who, again, the recounts on the daughter say between 3 and 5, the mother slammed the door and locked it, but the creature fought its way inside. And the accounts pretty much all agree that the mother fought, trying to defend the daughter. The inside of the RV was tore up. There was blood everywhere. The biggest display of damage was done to the mother, because she fought tooth and nail to try to keep out of that RV. The daughter had gone back to the back of the RV and hid. And when first responders got there, they initially didn't know there was a daughter there because they didn't find any trace of her. It was a couple that was driving through the campground that saw the carnage and drove over to Grand Rivers and called the sheriff's department. That was back before you could have a cell phone where you could call 911. And another thing is, there was no place in LBL I got cell reception. I don't know why. I just did not get cell reception inside LBL. But they drove to the nearest payphone to call the local sheriff's department. And then first responders showed up. And initially, first responders found 3 bodies. And when they started checking, like, they found small dresses and things like that. They're like, wait a minute, we got a small child missing. And that's when they started searching. And 2 of the officers were walking, and one of them felt something wet hitting his hat and hitting his shirt. And when he shined the light up, they found the little girl about 30 feet up a tree, and she'd been fed on.
Now, see, what's interesting to me, that's 2 different sources confirming the same story.
Mm-hmm.
And both sources are law enforcement that supposedly got there.
Right.
So
that story, that version of the story I got from Jody Cook, who got it from a highway patrolman who was there. Right.
And see, Kumbo said his version, which is almost identical to what you just said, came from, I believe, a sheriff's deputy that was on scene. So, or a park ranger. I can't remember which. But either way, I mean, that's 2 different sources confirming the same story, the same incident. But that's not the only famous one that we know of. There's also the bow hunter.
Right. I was about to ask on that one. That was the bow hunter. Wasn't that within the same time period, or was that a different year?
The bow hunter was more recent. I think the bow hunter was either in the late 80s or early 90s.
I want to say it was in the 90s.
Yeah, it was sometime afterward. I think it was in the 90s. Bow hunter, and this was I heard the story from the podcast that Coonbo Baker did. I haven't talked to anybody that has firsthand knowledge of this story, but Coonbo is somebody I consider a reliable source. Apparently, this guy went out to bow hunt, and sometime while he was camping there, he was attacked. His bow was broken, and they found him where he'd been dragged into the woods a couple of miles from his tent, and he had definitely been fed on.
Yeah, because his whole camp, from what I heard, his whole camp was destroyed.
Right. Pretty much everything was shredded.
Killed him, and even his bow was broken in half. Mm-hmm. And that's not an easy feat.
No, those bows are pretty stout.
Yeah. But to me, I don't know. What I can't piece together about that encounter is, did it attack him while he was in the tent? Or was he out hunting when he got attacked? And this thing went back and tore his camp up.
Well, if I remember correctly, and granted, it's been a while since I listened to the story from Kunbo, but I think there was blood found in the tent. So I think he was in the tent when he was attacked.
Okay.
At least that's if memory serves. I believe he was camped out in the tent and dragged from the campsite.
Now, and the way because he was supposed to come back from hunting, told his wife, "I'll be back Monday or whatever," and he didn't show up, and she called the park, called him in missing. This is where he was, and that's how they found him. Right.
I spoke to a guy in Paducah, Kentucky, and I talked to a couple of guys from there that had told me stories, including the guy who said that one tried to get him in his boat and he took off. I asked the guy, I said, "Do you know anything about the family that was killed by a creature in LBL?" And he goes, "Which one?" And I'm like, "What do you mean more?" And he would not elaborate. He's like, "I'm not going to get into it. I'm not going to tell you the story, but I will tell you it's happened more than once."
Well, now see, and that's very interesting because when Jessica remote reviewed the incident, that's one of the things that she hit on.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the first and only time this happened. There's been multiple attacks, multiple people killed, but these are the only ones we're hearing about.
Well, I was doing some digging last year prior to my trip to LBL. And if I remember correctly, there were 23 people missing in 2021 in LBL. I don't know if all of them were found, but also if you look at the area, if you research Kentucky animal attacks, all around that area, there are a lot of wild dog attacks. An old lady, a 13-year-old kid, people found, alongside the road, are all attributed to these dog attacks. So either Kentucky's got this plague of packs and packs of wild dogs roaming around attacking people, or something really amiss in those woods.
Well, you mentioned the 12-year-old kid.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the same one that was killed, carried off? They found, and the only detail they released was it was an unknown canine that did the attack.
That's the one. He'd been dragged up a hill.
This was just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that was just a couple of years ago. Also, there are still news stories coming out of that area. I did quite a bit of research on the area before I went to LBL. There's still news stories that are being put on local news stations in that area of animal attacks. There was one of the local sheriffs went on the news like, "I have no idea what's doing this." He said it's too big to be dogs. And, I think it was a horse that had been pretty much mauled. So they were trying to figure it out. And funny enough, the area I set my books, the Lakeview Man books, down in Stone County, Missouri, down near Kimberling City, the Stone County Sheriff's Department just put out a release this last week warning people who are hiking in the woods to be careful because there have been reports of something stalking people in the woods and they think it's a mountain lion.
They always think it's a mountain lion.
It's always a mountain lion. But that's not typical mountain lion behavior.
I don't know if you've heard us talk about this or not, but I was recently turned on to a couple of different accounts down here in Texas. And one of them was a sighting of a white dogman. Mm-hmm. 20 minutes from where I was sitting right now. And another one was up in Lipan, Texas. And there was a man, and this you can read the article on this one, guys. You can look this up. He was walking down a rural road. He went missing, didn't show back up the house. They went and looked for him. They found him. He had his throat ripped out. Now, what's weird is there was no other damage to the body. This was released. There's no other damage to the body except his throat being ripped out. Whatever did this was strong and fast. There was no defensive marks, no nothing. Now, the investigation involved, of course, the sheriff's department, the coroner. You got the coroner. You've got the Fish and Game, and then they brought in a civilian contracted tracker. The coroner and the sheriff's deputy said it was a mountain lion. One, that's not how mountain lions kill.
No, definitely not.
The body was not fed on. They're not going to kill for no reason.
Right.
And you're going to, just a single bite to the throat. No, I'm sorry. He's going to be clawed up, tore up, everything else.
Oh yeah. He'd been torn to shreds.
Right. They said it was a mountain lion. The coroner and the sheriff's department said it was a mountain lion. The wildlife and fish and game, this is what shocked the hell out of me. They came out and publicly said it was not a mountain lion because between them and their contracted tracker did not find any evidence in the area of a mountain lion attack, but we can't tell you what it is.
Can't or won't.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, what you folks have to remember, this is basically in the same area that I had my encounter, same part of Texas. So these critters are out there. And when I say these critters, I'm talking about dogmen right now. These critters are out there. So I don't know. It's like we were talking earlier. The list is awful short. What could have done this?
Right.
Because even if you wanted to say, oh, it was a pack of wild dogs, the body wasn't tore up.
Right. And that's not typical for animals. Had it been a bear or even feral hogs would have eaten him. They would have found nothing but teeth.
Right.
If they found that.
Exactly.
Feral hogs will eat the whole body.
But it would have been a mess.
What was
no
it
matter
last year
what
in
attacked
Texas?
him.
Was it last year in Texas that lady got out of her car and feral hogs knocked her down and ate her right in front of her house?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was last year, year before last, something like that.
Well, feral hogs, if it'd been an animal, they'd have ate it. They'd have ate them.
Right.
Yeah.
And even if it had been even if they didn't feed on it, the body wasn't tore up.
Right.
No other marks on the body.
Like
and they said no foul play. They wrote it off as the coroner wrote it off as an accidental death, no foul play.
Yeah.
With your throat being ripped out. Really?
Yeah. Natural causes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind getting back to with you, Tex, on that real quick, but I had one final question too for you, DA, about the LBL, because I just want to get this in because I've talked to a couple of different people and they always having versus any other forest they've been in. It's been a fine vibe, right? But they said when they're in the LBL, they had felt eerie or strange. And I was just wondering out of curiosity, when you were in LBL, did you have a different vibe from any other area you've been into?
Yeah, LBL is very different. You can feel it. You can feel the difference as soon as you enter LBL. When you cross the canal from Grand Rivers into LBL, you feel a change. It's just a very weird area, and I felt like I was being watched pretty much everywhere I went. In fact, if you watch the video on my YouTube channel of my LBL trip, at one point when I'm talking, it was just me and a tripod. I was talking to the camera. I was at the Nickel Cemetery. You can see me turn and look 2 or 3 times because I kept hearing something. And I finally shut the camera off and went out to look for it, and I couldn't find anything. But there were several places in LBL, especially Demumbers Bay, where I really felt like something was close by and watching me.
Yeah, you know how you could explain that? How you could explain it, because I find that to be so strange that certain places it's carefree, in other places it's just like creepy. I mean, do you think it's just because some of these cryptids just give off that energy, or is it predestined in our head? Hey, I'm going to LBL, so all of a sudden your mind is playing tricks on you, or do you think it's actually something that's real?
I went to LBL with a kind of a skeptic's mind. I didn't expect it to be what I got. I figured it was just going to be another place in the woods and maybe something dangerous. And I've been to places all my life going out in the woods, and I've found places in the woods where I thought, okay, something feels off here. But I have never have experienced a place quite like LBL. It just feels different. There are places in LBL where you're driving down some of these, and they're pretty much just very narrow roads. There's some of them that feel like you're driving through a tunnel. I mean, when you're in there in the summertime, the foliage is so thick you can't see more than a few feet off the road, and the place just has a very, very creepy vibe. And it's an interesting place. It's different than any other place I've ever been.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what.
I like to go.
I know Rob's got some family business he's got to take care of, and DA, we got to have you back because
anytime, brother, anytime.
We just got started on this conversation. I know me and you could go for hours.
More than likely, yeah.
Yeah, but y'all, it's was it DARoberts.net?
DARoberts.net.
.net. Y'all go see him over yonder. And Rob, you want to take us out?
Yeah, thank you to everybody in chat, everybody listening on the radio side and on YouTube. Everybody go subscribe over to D.A Roberts. Check him out on YouTube, as he said. Also, don't forget to come on down and see us all in the Alabama Bigfoot Conference coming up June 10th and 11th. And D.A, man, we got to have you back. Got to have you back.
Anytime, man. I'm game anytime.
All right, I appreciate that. And text if you want. You can find that button.